Derek said it the way some men say things they've never been contradicted on. "You'd never get in. Not at a place like ours." He didn't lower his voice. He didn't need to. There were 14 of us around that table, and every one of them was already smiling before he finished the sentence. "My name is Mara Reyes. I was 41 that spring, sitting between the salad I hadn't touched and a cousin who'd stopped asking me questions years ago. Derek was 29, engaged to Bridget, and holding court over a firm he clearly believed he'd built with his own hands. He talked about their hiring process the way people talk about a velvet rope. Selective. Ruthless. Not for everyone. "No offense," he added, which is what people say right before the offense. My cousin laughed. My aunt laughed. Someone reached for the wine. I looked at him for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then I looked back at my plate. I said nothing. Saying nothing had made me a lot of money. That's the part they didn't know. That's the part I'd spent years letting them not know, because correcting them had long ago stopped being worth the noise. So I let the laughter move on to something else. I let Derek believe he'd won a point that was never in play. He would remember this dinner. They all would, but not for the reason any of them thought that night. 9 days later, Derek would say my name again. He would say it very, very differently. Quote, "In my family, I had a role, and the role was simple. I was the one who never made it. Nobody said it in those words. They didn't have to. It lived in the pauses instead. The way conversation slid past me when careers came up. The way my aunt introduced my younger cousins by their titles and introduced me by my first name and nothing else. Bridget was the best at it. She had a talent for erasing you gently, in public, in a way that looked almost like kindness. Mara's still figuring things out, she'd say, patting the air near my shoulder. Or she'd ask everyone at the table what they were working on, and simply skip my chair, her eyes moving over me the way they move over a wall. I'd learned not to flinch. Flinching only confirmed the story. Derek had entered 8 months earlier and slotted into the family like he'd always belonged. That was the thing about him. He arrived loud and certain, and certainty is contagious in a room that's already made up its mind. Within weeks he was the favorite, and Bridget glowed beside him, and everyone agreed they were perfect, ambitious, going places. Nobody wondered what I thought. Nobody asked what I did all day. There was a version of me I could have shown them. I chose not to. Every year that choice got easier, and every year the distance got wider, and I told myself the distance was fine. It was quiet there. They'd decided who I was a long time ago. I'd simply stopped correcting them. Quote, "Grandma Corrine noticed things nobody else bothered to. She was 79 that year, and she'd spent a lifetime watching how people treated each other when they thought no one important was looking. She'd watched them treat me a certain way for a long time. She found me in the kitchen after that dinner, drying a glass I'd already dried. She didn't ask if I was all right. She knew better than to hand me a feeling I hadn't offered first. Instead, she said, quietly, 'You could have told them, you know. Any time these 6 years, you could have.' I said I didn't want a scene. She nodded like she'd expected exactly that. Then she told me about the folder. She kept one, she said, in the drawer beneath her Bible, and she'd been adding to it since the spring things first started to change for me. Clippings. A printout she didn't fully understand but knew was important. One laminated newspaper page she'd sealed in plastic so the ink would never fade. She'd protected the proof of me while the rest of them were busy deciding I was nothing. 'Why keep it hidden?' I asked. 'If you're so proud of it.' She set her hand over mine on the counter. Her skin was paper thin and warm. 'Because it's yours to spend,' she said. 'Not mine. You'll tell them when it costs you nothing to.' She looked at me steadily. Not before. I didn't understand yet how right she was. I only knew the glass in my hand was dry, and that somewhere in her house a folder had been waiting patiently for 6 years for a morning that hadn't come yet. Derek couldn't leave it alone. Over dessert, he circled back to the firm, the way he always circled back to it, and this time he made it a challenge. 212 people, he said. And I've personally sat in on half the hires this year. You want to know what it takes to get past me? He was looking at me when he said it. He wanted an audience for whatever he thought was about to happen. Bridget smiled into her coffee. My aunt said, "Oh, Derek, In the delighted way people say a name when they want you to keep going. I'm serious, he said. Apply. Come in. Sit across from me and see how it feels. He laughed. No shame if you don't. It's not for everyone. The table waited. This was the part where I was supposed to demur, to say I wasn't qualified, to shrink until they felt comfortable again. I'd played that part for years. It fit me like an old coat. I set down my fork. All right, I said. I'll come in. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then pleasure, because he thought I'd just walked into something. Bridget's eyebrows lifted. My cousin murmured that this would be interesting. They were already imagining it, the whole scene. Me stammering. Derek gracious in victory. He told me the address like I might not find it. He told me to be there Thursday at 9, sharp. I told him I'd be there Thursday at 9. I didn't tell him I already had a key. Quote, Thursday, 9 o'clock. I arrived at 8:50 and stood in the lobby I already knew the square footage of, watching people badge through the turnstiles, none of them aware who was standing among them. Derek was upstairs performing. I could hear him before I reached the room, that easy, carrying voice, telling the panel some story that made one of them laugh politely. There were 4 of them at the table, folders open, pens ready. He'd positioned himself at the head, of course, like the chair belonged to him. He was enjoying this. He'd been enjoying it since dinner. I stepped into the doorway. Priya was just behind me, silent, holding nothing but a slim leather folio. The panel saw me first. That was the thing Derek missed. He was mid-sentence, still turned toward his audience, while across the table a woman's expression changed. Then the man's beside her, a small shift, recognition arriving in stages. One of them straightened. Another glanced at Priya, then at me, then quickly down at the papers, as if the answer might be printed there. Derek felt the room cool before he understood why. He turned. Mara, he said, and there was a beat of pure delight on his face, because in his version I'd just walked into his trap. Sit anywhere, he said, gesturing grandly. Nobody at the table moved. The silence stretched. 40 seconds by the clock on the wall, though he didn't seem to notice it the way the others did. Derek was still smiling when I sat down. He was the only one who was. Derek gestured at the empty chair like a man offering a favor. Have a seat, he said. Let's see what you've got. He glanced at the panel, inviting them to enjoy this with him. I stayed standing. Before we start, I said, I should clear something up so we don't waste anyone's morning. I looked at the 4 of them, then at him. 11 weeks ago, my company completed its acquisition of this firm. The purchase closed at $41 million. I signed for it. I let that sit. I'm the incoming CEO. I start Monday. The room went very still. One of the panelists set down her pen. Priya, by the door, didn't move at all. Derek's smile stayed where it was for a second too long, the way a building stays standing for a second after the ground is already gone. Then it began to slide. I watched him do the arithmetic, the dinner, the challenge, the 212 people he'd bragged about. All of them mine now. The check he collected every 2 weeks. My signature soon at the bottom of it. Mara, he said. It came out thin. You told me I'd never get in, I said. There was no heat in it. I wasn't angry. I'd stopped being angry a long time ago. You were right about one thing. I didn't apply. I looked at the clock on the wall. 6 minutes. That was all it had taken. Thank you all for your time, I said to the panel, and I meant it. The interview's over. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't have to. The call started that afternoon. Bridget first, then my aunt, then Bridget again. I let them ring. By evening, there were 17 unread texts from Derek, each one longer than the last. Moving from apology to explanation to something close to bargaining. I read none of them all the way through. There was nothing in them for me, and answering would only have given him the scene he wanted, the one where I was finally angry enough to match him. I wasn't going to match him. That was never the point. Bridget did reach me, eventually. She wanted to know how I could have let them all sit there looking foolish. She wanted to know why I hadn't just said something. I told her the truth, which was that I'd said everything I needed to, at the only table that required it. Then I wished her well with the wedding. And I meant that too. Grandma Corrine came by that weekend. She didn't gloat. because she never had. She just took the folder down from the shelf, the one she'd kept for 6 years, and set it in my hands. Inside was the laminated newspaper clipping from the March her granddaughter's first company sold, dated before any of them had thought to ask what I did all day. She'd saved it while they were still deciding I was nothing. "You held it a long time," I said. "So did you," she said. I took the clipping home. I set it face down in the bottom drawer of my desk, under the quiet, where it could finally rest. I didn't need to look at it anymore. I already knew what it said.